Hey, welcome to Trialogues podcast, everybody. This is number 4 of who knows how many we're going to end up doing. We hope we'll just keep going on this. This is the podcast where we engage in provocative acts of punditry around topics in real estate, marketing, technology, and leadership. I am Robert Hahn. I am the managing partner of 7D. I do some blogging on notoriousrob.com. And I guess most people think I just kind of stir stuff up and see what happens.
I am Matthew Shadbolt. I'm the Director of Interactive Product and Marketing at the Corcoran Group in New York City. I am responsible for everything digital that touches the customer for a very large brokerage of 2,000 agents. I also write for Inman Next, and I've just started writing for Retso blog as well.
I'm Gaylord DeWald, and I'm the president and janitor of Thought Faucet, a strategic creative studio up in Burlington, Vermont. I don't stir anything up, and I don't do anything crazy. I just kind of do whatever it is I do. I write some stuff for Inman that people sometimes read, and I write some stuff for Inman Next, and also writing now for Retso. And, that's me.
Right on. And, gentlemen, I'm coming to you this week from sunny California. Where our producer is also located, and she's behind the virtual glass. Will be Lindsay Planetta of OC Real Estate Voice, who is a broker, agent, and a coach, as well as she gets to put up with us as we, have our fun doing these podcasts. So I got to tell you, hey, before we start, every time I come to Southern California, I'm just amazed at how amazing the weather is. It's like a beautiful 75, no humidity. How are things in your neck of the woods?
It's overcast here. We've had a terrible week of rain and extreme humidity. I was at the Yankee game last night, and there was a rain delay, which is always horrible whenever you go to Yankee Stadium because it gets really, really humid there. So we just hung out at the Carvel ice cream stand for what felt like about 90 minutes. So it's hot and humid as you would expect a New York summer to start to be.
Yeah, Vermont's doing pretty solid this week. We had some awesome weather. Today it's a little cloudy, no big deal. Whenever I go to Southern California, I'm always kind of struck by the miles and miles of strip malls. That's the part that always gets me. When I'm there, it's oh my God, this is what the rest of the country looks like. I always forget that, that once I leave my little Vermont bubble, that things are, operate differently. But the beach there is gorgeous, and that's awesome. So
I haven't actually
slag on Southern California or anything other than their strip malls.
I haven't even actually seen the beach in Southern California, I think, in, 2 years.
You should go for a drive down that way. It's really pretty.
Yeah, dude, you know what, though? Southern California strip malls, quote-unquote, at least they have some just gorgeous malls, and, like Irvine Center that I was at recently. It's a beautiful outdoor
Gorgeous and mall don't belong. Come on.
So, see, my point there is, Gaylord, you don't know what strip malls are like until you've been to, let's say, Houston, which is obviously where I live.
Probably
compared to that, SoCal is just freaking gorgeous. But I think I asked this question generally so that Matt can tell me how crappy the weather is in New York, and I applaud myself for moving the hell out.
Make you feel better?
So listen,
I can do to make you feel better, Rob.
Thank you. I know that is your main purpose in life, and I really appreciate it. So listen, guys, it's been a couple...
To be honest, Rob, the weather is always, and the light in general is just a little bit dimmer when you're not in the room. So, wherever you are, it's just that much dimmer, so it's always that way.
So anyway, it's been a couple of weeks since we spoke, and I thought we would start by talking about one of the biggest news that's hit since we did this is Zillow rolling out their $10 a month agent website product. Matthew, let me start with you. I mean, as somebody who manages brokerage technology, what do you think about what they're doing? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's fascinating to see what they're doing as they start to move more towards that area of I guess agent support and agent tools, if you like, and away from how you would traditionally sort of perceive Zillow as a search product. It's interesting that it comes sort of on the back of a lot of the conversations about syndication and the issues with that, because I think it's important from a brand perspective that Zillow actually does start to round out and communicate here's all the other stuff that we do. Because, you know, the kind of work that I'm exposed to at Zillow is, you know, only a fraction of it is actually, you know, pertains to the syndication conversation. A lot of the other stuff that we do is about, you know, mobile and analytics and support and all the other sort of amazing things that those, you know, that you would expect from a software company. So I think it's really interesting. I mean, one of the things I'm curious to see is how many people actually do it. Because, you know, from a lot of the agents that I talk to in and outside of Corcoran, the idea of having your own website, from my perspective, isn't as popular as it used to be. I think the idea of having your own site that sort of, you know, is like this kind of one-pager format that they have with all the data and your listings on it and stuff. I see and I hear less demand for that than I used to. About 5 years ago, I think probably connected with blogging, people were like, oh, I'm going to have my own site and I'm going to write a blog. And so from that perspective, I'm not sure that it is, for example, like a threat to a brokerage website or even a threat to like an agent's own presence within Zillow. And I don't know enough about the relationship with Diverse Solutions and the existing implementation of the product. Maybe Gaylord, or you can explain that a little bit more. But I'm very curious to see sort of whether people will even kind of do something like that. Because from my perspective, I'm not sure that it really kind of solves a problem as people start to find their voice and their sort of venue for putting their personality out online and their content out online, far away from syndicators. Social is obviously the big one that does that. So, I mean, what do you guys think?
I'll pick it up from there. I think actually that it does solve a problem. The problem it solves is all those really, really crappy websites that are out there. I think for most of the people that I run into or that I work with or whatever are at a stage where they're kind of beyond that. But you know, there's so many garbage websites out there for real estate and for other stuff too, of course. But trying to think how to say it. So there's just a lot of junky templated sites, and it's not that their template is the problem. It's that the sites are junky, and then they make a lot of them, you know. And
so Gaylord, let me ask you, Gaylord. Like, if you say it solves a problem, are you talking about people moving from one to the other? Because from a lot of the conversations that I have, I may have the perception that these websites are kind of crappy, but all the conversations I have is that the agents love them. They love that they have their own websites, and they don't think they're crappy, even though we might, or you know, a user might. It's just the idea of having their own website is kind of the cool thing. But if they already have one, are they likely to transition to something that perhaps offers less customization? You know, what do you think?
Well, actually, what I think is it's not even the ones that have, like, someone who already has a website that's operating on WordPress using something like the Diverse Solutions plugin or framing in something from WolfNet or whatever their system is. Anybody that's already on a WordPress website, this isn't for them. I mean, necessarily. I think it could be, but that isn't where the growth opportunity for this is. This is for all the people who have like things that are even worse than that, where they already don't have any kind of customization capability. Because there are tons of those sites out there, these top producer things and stuff. And so it's like for those people, and people use those sites, and I know this because I field these kind of calls all the time. They've been on some kind of system and their website doesn't work and they don't know why, and it's because it's like a garbage website. So when we get to the data, it's pretty obvious. You know, they got bounce rate, you know, through the roof. You know, no traffic. I mean, it's just like, oh, okay, well that's why that isn't working, because this website is disgusting. Those people, and they pay a lot for that, right? The expensive part of most real estate websites is the real estate search functionality. You know, the difference between paying $10 a month for your web hosting and that's it, because that's all you really need to run a WordPress site, versus paying $300 a month because you have, you know, a IDX search in it. So that's really kind of where it basically changes where is the bottom, like the least capable, acceptable real estate website right now is the Zillow site. Anybody there are people out there today that are paying more for less functionality than what Zillow is offering in that site.
Oh, for
there may
sure.
be strategic considerations about it, and obviously people have feelings about the different aggregators, but there's a wide swath of the market that has just these sort of like garbage websites, and some of them are promoted by like the brokers. The broker gets into some kind of relationship with a crappy web firm, and they buy up and they give all these garbage websites to all their agents as some kind of benefit. And then eventually the agents have to, go off on their own anyway, because if they do want to do web stuff, or get leads from the web, they got to kind of move on over. So that's sort of that side of it. I think it's a decent product. It's a decent product. The fact that it's not as flexible from a design standpoint, I think for some people will be a deal killer. And if that's the case, you pay for some custom design and make your own website. That's fine. But there are people out there now with less.
I have a question for you guys. I don't know this, so it's a general, a genuine question. Do you know if Zillow is selling ads on these sites?
Oh, I don't know. I don't think they are, though.
I
don't think they are because it's a paid product. I think if it was a free product, then they might, but I don't think they would.
Okay.
And most of Zillow's ads. Oh, you talking about like banner ads? Because that's not really.
I don't know. Like, could there be a premium to have a unit across other agent websites in your zip code, like that kind of stuff? I'm not sure. I could imagine it would be problematic for the reasons that you suggest. But
yeah, I think that'll never happen. But here's
I don't. That doesn't. Yeah, they're not going to do
that. What I think is fascinating from my standpoint is this is very much. It's like exactly in line with what Zillow told us that they are going to do, and they've told us why they want to do it. And what's fascinating for me is reading all the conspiracy theories that realtors come up with right after this. There's all this stuff. I think I saw something on AGB where they talk about, there's resistance to this Zillow product that's building or something, and various agents and people are out there on, social media or whatever talking about this is terrible and it's another way for them to, screw us. And I think I saw a comment that this is obviously a precursor to Zillow opening their own brokerage. And I'm like, so maybe I'm the only person who actually read Zillow's, annual report. Maybe I'm the only person who actually listened to the earnings call, because when Spencer Rascoff and I think the chief financial officer, they went, because they're a public company now, they went and told Wall Street exactly what their strategy is, what they're planning on doing. And what they said is, and I'm reading from their earnings call, the 2011 earnings call, they said is, the strategy is all about shifting from a seller of advertising, which is very finite and sort of monolithic, to a provider of SaaS, that's software as a service, based suite of productivity tools, of which ads or lead gen is part of it. But CRM, listing distribution, technology for aiding websites, training and other things that agents need to make the most of the internet and of this technology revolution. That is the direction that we are moving in. He said this. He's told us this is what Zillow wants to do. So I guess I'm kind of puzzled that when they release a $10 product, which certainly, based on what I've seen of it and based on the price point, is hella competitive with a whole lot of IDX website vendors that are out there in our space right now, I guess I kind of look at it and go, why is anyone surprised by this? Isn't this sort of obvious? If Spencer has said, this is the direction we're going in, we no longer want to be an advertising company, quote unquote, we want to be a software as a service company that provides technology tools to agents, the most obvious thing that they would release first would be a really low-cost, high-productivity, high-design agent website, right?
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of how the problem with the reaction, with a lot of the conspiracy theory type reactions to this stuff, is that Zillow has always communicated these kind of things, and now, like you said, they have to. They're legally obligated to communicate these things. But for whatever reason, these types of types of stories don't really get a lot of coverage in, the grander scheme of, real estate reporting, I think. And as a result, people, don't hear about it and they don't know. And then, the product comes out and they're like, well, where's this coming from? And, so I don't think that this is really, Zillow's problem in many ways. I think they're continuing to make amazing things based on their brand and product path. And I think it's a good thing that they're actually starting to leverage what they're really amazing at, which is software development, obviously. But I think it's sort of interesting to see what something like that does, like that kind of approach of saying, we're amazing software developers and we're really great at like applications and application support, in addition to syndication and ad-based models. What that does to the existing infrastructure of like brokerage IT departments and like the MLS, like what actually happens to the data. If you have like somebody that becomes best in class within the industry at solving all these problems that agents have with technology, if you're a technology provider inside of the industry already, that's where I think the rub starts to come in.
And that was actually my question to you, Matthew, and I want to have a follow-up to Gaylord, is, okay, so you work for a brokerage, right? When you hear Spencer, when you hear Zillow say this and just make it clear, this is what we want to do, I mean, does that worry you? Does it, is it a challenge for you, or is it more like you go, this is awesome because now we don't have to do it? I mean, what's your take on it?
Yeah, I don't think we feel threatened by it at all. Certainly, I can't really speak for the views of Corcoran on this, but from my personal perspective, I think it's a huge opportunity, because it's not an either-or thing, it's an and thing. It's like you could have this that, a brokerage already provides, or the MLS provides, or your local association provides, or something like this. Or, or you can do this, or you can do both. You just have more opportunities to, be amazing online. And I think that's a really healthy thing. I think thinking about it is sort of like, well, I have to do this or I have to do this is sort of the wrong way to think about it. I think it can easily be both.
So question for you, Gaylord.
I want to jump in on that one.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Because some people were bringing that up in some online discussions about it. Which I have to give up this and try that. I'm like, well, luckily the price point on this thing at $10 a month. Try it and see if it's better than what you got.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Not like you have to keep doing anything.
Very simple.
$10 a month, and you see if it works. And if it doesn't work, you stop doing it. It's pretty straightforward. So the financial risk of playing with it is less than the amount of time that you're going to spend, I guess, configuring it, getting it up and running. But,
correct.
But it's one of those things where I think people spend more time worrying about it in discussion groups, and if they just tried it out, it would actually take less time and they'd have more relevant answers.
But Gaylord, this was my question.
I agree.
Gaylord, but this is my question to you, which is when you and I first met, I think you were working at some custom website developer up in Vermont, weren't you? Mm-hmm. So now bring that perspective. Again, I know that you're not in that business anymore where you build, agent websites or broker websites, right? But kind of what a company that does that is thinking like. If you're one of those guys, if you're WolfNet, if you're Z57, if you're, even a custom developer like Jim Marks out of Virtual Results or, or any of these guys, right?
Mm-hmm.
How worried are you now? Is this a worrisome thing, or are you just like, well, no, it's just a template thing. It doesn't matter. We add so much value. What do you think the thought is there?
What I'm about to say isn't directly applicable to any of the people you specifically named, so there's my caveat. But I would say that there's less room in the vendor market right now. As soon as that announcement came out, there was instantly significantly less room in a very profitable segment of the real estate web development vendor market. And that segment was people who pay money and don't do anything. Right? There's a lot of people that do that. People who pay money and get their junky website, and they don't really look at it, they don't really care about it, and but they pay their fee, right? And they pay it consistently. And maybe they go out of business because they don't do anything anywhere, or
Right.
but there's maybe there's more churn in that market or something like that. But that's a profitable segment. They don't call your tech support, chew up time. They don't hassle your sales team for deals or whatever. They just kind of do it. It's a really profitable segment. And there is no longer really any room there for any of the vendors, right? Because they can't match $10 a month. And it's particularly for the kind of functionality that are going into these Zillow sites. So I think vendors are going to, like web development vendors, are going to have to figure out how they're going to position themselves in regards to this. So if they currently have a giant roster full of non-engaged clients, like clients that either actively dislike their web vendor, and let's face it, there are a lot of those, or actively could care less about their vendor. Like they aren't actually, like, could care less, right? Because if there is no relationship between the real estate site owner and the vendor, then as soon as that site owner hears about this $10 site, they're going to start weighing the pros and cons, because the difference between $10 a month and, $200 or $300 a month is enough to make people examine whether they want to change relationships or not.
Sure.
So that's the side that I think all of them have to really examine. They just.
Taylor, do you see like a big sort of a culling of crappy vendors and crappy websites as a result of this? I mean, do you see that it's really going to shake that up?
I don't think that. It'll be interesting. I don't know. I don't know that anyone's going to necessarily go out of business, but they're going to have to adjust.
Because I would imagine $10 a month, based on what you're saying, is a loss leader for Zillow then, right?
Well,
no, I don't think so.
I don't think so. I don't think it is a loss. For them, because they already have the expensive part, which is the search. That's
right.
what makes it expensive. So their advertising business is offsetting the cost of search. Somewhere in their spreadsheets they've got this worked out, but they've already solved what is the biggest problem for a tech vendor who makes real estate websites, is how the hell do I get all these different MLS data feeds to play ball together? They've already solved that problem. That's the expensive problem. So they don't have to charge for it.
Right, and besides,
it's a free WordPress theme and done. It's a piece of cake.
I think the thing that kind of blows my mind is, so I read somewhere that Zillow to date has spent $250 million on building their technology, right? $250 million. Last I saw, I think they were claiming something north of 35 million monthly visitors to Zillow.com. So I'm kind of like, that $250 million of sunk capital, that gave them some of the intellectual property, I don't think it's going to cost them anything more, to spin out a bunch of WordPress websites,
No,
and I guess
certainly not.
Yeah, and I guess if I'm in that website business, and to your point, Gail, if I'm in that very profitable kind of template-driven, just kind of buy one for $20 a month kind of deal, I'm screwed, because I don't have $250 million of technology, investment in the back end.
And so many of those guys have been just resting on the fact that it's hard, that the barrier to entry for real estate, getting this IDX search to work, is high enough that people don't want to enter the market. Like all kinds of people examine, I want to start doing real estate websites. It seems like an easy game. There's lots of agents. The products out there are crappy. And then you look at trying to solve that data problem. You say, what? I don't have the money to do it. Zillow took the time and did it, and they raised the funds and they made it happen. Now they're going to run it.
I'm wondering what you guys think about this, because one of the first things that came to my mind, and it's probably because this is where my obsession is at the moment. When I saw that Zillow's releasing a $10 website, one of the very first things that kind of came to mind is that this is sort of a clear sign, right, that the web is dead, that the web is no longer particularly profitable. In other words, what I was thinking was, okay, I just put up a blog post about it recently, that Zillow's, I think their mobile traffic is growing at like 300% year over year, right? Their mobile app is generating anywhere from 30 to 40% of all the traffic, to Zillow in all of its networks. And I almost felt like, yeah, of course, at this point, Zillow could go, sure, let's give away websites because who cares? You know, the web is not where it's at. It's mobile where it's at. And I noticed they're not giving away mobile apps. You know what I mean? Do you guys think that at all?
I'm not sure what you mean, Rob.
What I mean is it's almost like Zillow, when they said, you know, we should do these $10 agent websites. It's almost like Zillow knows something that the rest of us don't, where they're saying that the web, quote unquote, you know, those terrestrial websites, that's not where the action is anymore. Right? So they don't mind, you know, sort of giving that away to agents for $10 a month. They just don't mind because what Zillow knows is that all of the consumer traffic, all the real interest is all going to mobile. Right.
Right, and that's where actually all the advertising dollars are shifting anyway. So, I mean, they're starting to not to cannibalize their own traffic, if you like, but to focus on mobile and to sort of commoditize the thing that's that people are moving away from. So I think you're right, and it's not like that Zillow sees something that nobody else sees. I mean, anybody that has the even just primitive knowledge about how the web works will know that mobile is increasingly where the vast majority of users are. I mean, that you don't need to be into tech to know that, I think. But
now you guys, I mean, again, I'm not asking for any proprietary information. Corcoran, you guys have one of the top apps in New York City real estate, I believe. Right? I mean, are you seeing this sort of shift away from terrestrial web towards mobile?
Absolutely, and we see it across everybody that we work with, and we've actually been very, very vocal about that, specifically with Zillow. Corcoran has a very close mobile ad relationship with Zillow. We were one of the first ad partners in that, and one of the statistics that I often share with people is that people spend, while they might be smaller in number, they spend 6 to 7 times longer in the Corcoran app than they do on Corcoran.com.
Wow.
So they're smaller in number, but they're massive in terms of use.
Right.
And when you start to factor in that the thing is a phone as well, that becomes very, very important in terms of conversion. So, I don't think that anybody is making a secret of any of this. But what your point is, I think, Rob, is that there's a vast, vast percentage of the industry that is not acting upon that information, and that might be the problem.
No, they're not acting on it, and I think they're stuck back in like 1998. I'm constantly frustrated by this whole, syndication discussion, whatever, because I'm going, you guys are currently fighting over a well-plowed field that the guys who really know what's going on have already conceded to you. Like, they've moved on. Those guys have moved on to mobile because they know that's where the action is. And they're seeing 300% year-over-year growth. And here's the industry still debating and arguing over, like...
Absolutely. And then when the industry moves on to say, well, how come all the mobile users use Zillow? It'll be too late.
It'll be too late. I mean...
Yeah, it's totally like of fighting like last year's battles. Like another example of this, that like in the tech industry in general. There was a great article I read recently about Flickr and the photo sharing site and its acquisition by Yahoo. And that at the time that Yahoo bought Flickr had photo sharing. It had a social graph in terms of being able to identify friends, family, and other. It had messaging, like all the core features of, say, Facebook today: social graph, image focused, and messaging system. And Yahoo bought this, and all they cared about was the image tags, because they were still trying to fight Google on the issue of image categorization, image search. And they basically had managed to buy something that had, like at that time, a really vibrant social network built around shared images, which, as we know from the Instagram thing, somebody thinks is worth a lot of money today. But they totally didn't. They were fighting the wrong battle. Even though they had the right tool, they basically gutted it, and like now it's kind of like just another website or whatever. And I look at the examples of how people are approaching mobile, or particularly in regards to the aggregators. And I see the same thing. They're, like you said, Rob, they're still upset. They still have their feelings are still kind of hurt from what happened at the beginning of that relationship, where the brokers and stuff felt ripped off. So they're still kind of not getting over that and figuring out what to do next, and that just hasn't been resolved for them. And I don't think
all the time that they do that,
yeah,
right,
yeah,
all the time that they do that, they're losing equity and losing ground in the next battle, which is mobile. Yeah. And you know, to your point with Flickr versus Facebook, for example, the key thing that Facebook did was to sort of take everything that Flickr did and add social tagging to it. That was the big thing that wasn't in Flickr, was like tag your friends in a photo, because they were so hung up on all this SEO stuff. And you know, Facebook comes in and adds one very important but actually very small piece of functionality, and as a result becomes the largest photo sharing site in the world.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But I feel like we could bring these two strands together. The Zillow with the $10 website, the fact that, the real estate industry, for whatever reason, loves to fight the, last year's battles. And there's a topic that's come up recently. And by recent, I mean, I think it was yesterday and today. Kind of want to get your thoughts on this. So I guess it was Michael McClure posted on Raise the Bar group asking how people build websites, right? What's important to a website. And I think the options were, is it, IDX, is it property search, is it content, or is it SEO, something like that. There are, I think last I looked, there's 100 comments in there, and the fight that's going on right now is amazing. So the fight, from what I can tell, is on the one hand, you have people who think that content-based marketing, meaning, blog posts, community information, original content, this is the long-term, viable future for real estate marketing. Now, here's the question. All three of us were content creators, but we're not doing it to sell houses, right? Well, except maybe you, Matthew, because, you do content creation for Corcoran, right? I mean, that's mostly you.
Yeah, the work I do is geared towards selling property, yeah.
Right. Okay, so the question is how valid is that perspective? The notion of content-based marketing for real estate services, right? Especially if we think that the overall technology platform is shifting towards more of a mobile platform. What do you think?
Well, I think one of the key things that I always look at is the amount of time that people spend with our products, right? Time spent with a brand, whether that's an agent brand or a brokerage brand or whatever. Time spent with that person across the web, and we include mobile with that now, obviously, but across interactive is sort of the key metric. And that metric is finite as it relates to search, right? And your content within search, like within Zillow, is mixed in with everything else. So the argument when it comes to content creation is that it rounds out a richer, deeper experience, optimizing and lengthening the amount of time that people spend with your content. And if you can make that more fun and insightful and helpful and, all the kind of social layers of that from a content perspective, so much the better. But I think time spent with content exclusively in search is limited. And this is sort of the argument pro content creation. But the wrinkle with that is that content consumption on mobile is still tricky in terms of long form stuff, in terms of video, and in terms of deep, rich real estate content outside of looking at listings. So I think that content creation is actually a very, very key part of conversion based on time spent with a brand. So I don't see it as is it search or is it content creation? It's both, I think. It's easily both.
I want to jump in on that because that's like Matthew's just presented a really great branding perspective on it of the, let's look at amount of time spent as a sort of a metric for are we starting to build a relationship with this person or not. But I think it's also the same story gets told, more on the like direct marketing, old school web conversion funnel approach. The same story starts to ring through as well, where like if you look at, I've been thinking about this for a while. The idea basically of search itself, like the search functionality, may not be the most like useful thing from a direct marketing kind of approach as well. And like the idea basically of a searchless real estate website. And the thinking goes like this, right? So most people who call or contact an agent or a broker from a website listing, or from a newspaper listing or whatever, they rarely buy the house that they're talking about. Mm-hmm. So, and that's like a thing that everybody agrees with whenever I ask, hey, is that true? And they'll say, yeah, it is true. Like people don't ever buy the property that they call about. So there's that. And then there's the whole search functionality as we know it today with like tons of check boxes and all this other stuff. Like there's nobody that's like enjoying that process. So, and they go through a lot of effort, and we see this in the data. Like they go back to the search and they redo it and they resort it, and they spend a lot of time messing around with the search. If you look at how much time do they spend messing around with the search versus looking at properties, it's a weird proportion. And then further from there, so basically people are spending a lot of time playing with an interface, and they're not actually looking at property when they're playing with the interface. They're dealing with a miserable interface, and and they're going through all this effort in order to not buy the house that they're going to ultimately find and contact you about. So it's sort of right. So it doesn't. Yeah. And you throw into the mix here. Remember that what the expensive part of the website is, right? It's the IDX search. Right. That's at the center of this kind of dysfunctional situation. And so I think that there's something in here about like what's valuable and what isn't. Like if the goal is to get somebody's phone number or whatever, like lead gen, the search interface and the search user process, it seems to me that there may be a better way.
I agree with you. I agree with you, Gaylord. And one of the key things that I'm always interested in is that NAR customer study where it talks about how long the person is spending online before they reach out to the agent. And one of the things that I think is really important is to look at, like you said, like where people spend time in that 18-month funnel. Because search, especially real estate search, is actually a very small part of that, more sort of towards the end of the process. It becomes important right before you contact the agent. But when you look at where people spend time online in that 18-month window on average, a lot of it is not on real estate sites at all. A lot of it is in social. A lot of it is in Google. And a lot of it is just, more geared towards a content creation type of approach than a IDX or, syndicated search type of approach. So for the exact reasons that you say, that people don't end up where they start. The customer is sort of inherently irrational when it comes to that kind of decision-making process. They don't call and say, give me this one. Otherwise, there would be sort of like an add to cart button on these things. Right. It doesn't really work like that. So, from a content creation perspective, the more times you can sort of hit people in that 18-month window with, top of mind type, some more like that direct mail type marketing approach that you mentioned, that's really where it becomes powerful. Not at the end, it's like months, almost years before that, I think. Does that make sense?
I think it makes perfect sense, but totally I want to jump in here. I want to jump in here real quick because this, again, this is our podcast. I'm not looking to, pimp out my other company here at Direct, but we actually have found some really interesting perspectives on it so far. Now, before, and I know you and I have had some, debates about this, Matthew, about sample size and whatnot, and I grant you all of that. So, the consumers that we may have, heard from, maybe they're totally unrepresentative. But so far in 2 events, I think the total size is maybe 24 to 25 consumers. Dude, what we're finding is none of these people do they just don't use real estate content at all. And it was fascinating. So since it's a focus group, what we're looking for is, well, why? It's not necessarily what is it you're doing or how you're doing, but why. And so far, I think what we're finding is that even during that 18-month funnel, right, when the consumer's thinking about, okay, I want to buy a house or I want to move or what have you, they're still completely focused on property. We've done we've videotaped people, asking them, so what did you do when you first started thinking that you want, and they're like, well, I go to, Realtor.com and I just kind of start looking around. Right? They're nowhere near committed. They're nowhere near, I want to buy a house. Right? But a lot of them, they already kind of know the neighborhoods that they're interested in, right? Or they live nearby. I think, the NAR stat was something like, I can't remember what it was some vast majority of people buy within 10 miles, of where they are today. They kind of know where they want to be and so on. It was mind-blowing, It was absolutely mind-blowing. And I didn't think that. I thought, as you did, Matthew, that, it's all, that content-based marketing is extraordinarily powerful. What I guess I'm sort of wondering now is maybe not. Maybe from the consumer standpoint, the buyer standpoint, they're not thinking about what, sort of real estate articles are out there. Maybe all the ones.
No. And I'm not suggesting that that's the case at all. Either. Okay. I agree with everything you say, and I think, sample size or not, what you're hearing from customers is, undoubtedly what is going on. However, I think, one of the things that I think is important is to look at the data of what's going on, to actually see what happens to content, right, in terms of use, and where the question of where the customer originates and how many times they've been exposed to the kinds of things that you do is a really, really difficult thing to track. It's like trying to remember the first time you had a Coke. It's like that kind of problem, right? Because very often what will happen, and there's data behind this, is that for if you take a very specific example, for example, right, a Facebook ad, people have to see it 12 to 14 times before they even begin to think about clicking on it. Because they don't even see it. They don't even see it to begin with, right? And then the more they're exposed to it, and then you put the social validation in, and you put Rob liked this as well, then you start to see it. But very often, when it comes to created content, they may not be aware or remember that they've seen it. It may just not resonate with them. But what it starts to do cumulatively across 18 months is it starts to put that process into their head, so that when they do go into search, they say, I kind of remember who that brokerage was, or I've seen that agent's name before, and that's more the brand and marketing kind of discussion, as opposed to, content creation doesn't work. It doesn't matter if they saw your post on burgers in Midtown or not. The fact is that they were sort of ambiently aware that you are the person to go to.
No, and this is I think why I wanted to talk about this, and I think this is the perfect group to do it in, because basically whenever we get into this sort of content-based marketing, Corcoran always comes up, as a shining example of a company that's doing it the right way and having huge success with it. Right? And I look at that and go, that's true. Corcoran is having huge success with it. And the guy that's, potentially responsible for that is on this call, with me right now. And what I guess I've kind of looked at is, do people understand, what sort of work and sophistication it takes to do this? And, and you're not doing it for, one agent. You're doing it for, one of the largest and oldest brokerages, that people talk about ambient awareness. If you just walk
Right.
around and start seeing signs, you're ambiently aware. Right?
And New Yorkers are really, really good at ignoring things.
Yeah, I guess that's the part that I look at. Now, here's the thing. I'm not saying that content-based marketing doesn't work. Of course it works. I mean, Sue Adler, who's my partner here at Direct, she's probably gotten more business off of her community videos than any other single thing, on her website, including maybe IVF search.
Prior to Zillow, Jay Thompson is a fantastic example of that.
Yeah, there's no doubt that it does kind of work. What's sort of bizarre, I guess, in my mind is some of the content-based marketing to me just seems lucky. It just feels lucky. Like you just lucked into, having really good SERPs, or you just kind of lucked into a great video, or you just lucked into something. Or it looks like, it requires a full-time professional marketer who knows what the hell he's doing. Right.
Well, the thing that people get hung up on, I think, is that they think, they look at conversion rates per piece of content. They look at it in a sort of singular fashion rather than cumulatively and over time. And, that's really the deal here. It's like, I'll use the Corcoran example, if we like. Do we think that people are going to reach out to agents as a result of seeing a Foursquare tip? Of course not. But combined, 2,500 tips across the city, across 16,000 users, in combination with, tens of thousands of other social platform followers, in addition to syndication and in addition to advertising, all of which is bundled together as content creation for us. Do I think that cumulatively over the period of time that works? Well, there's no question that it works. The data is there that it works.
Right.
But it's not, you can't look at it like, did my video convert? You have to look at it in terms of like, well, what have I been doing over 2 years to build audience and build equity in the platform, and is that working? Do people watch my videos longer than they used to? Do people visit my site more as a result of what I've made in YouTube or something like that? And it's not like a kind of one and then convert. It's like many over time and then convert. And where I can share this because I've shared it publicly before, but where we start to see the results at Corcoran is lift inside of syndication. The more we do content creation and the more we do in social in particular, the greater lift we have at no cost inside of syndication. And that's very, very powerful because it's a huge cost saver.
I totally agree. I think, though, this is where my concern lies. When people hear you say this, Matthew, right, I think they get the idea that, so of course, all of this, quote, content creation that I'm doing is really for my branding, and therefore it's valid because Corcoran's been successful with it. And I do wonder, isn't there a difference between, again, like a company the size and history and stature of Corcoran doing it versus like some realtor doing it,
Of course, I want to jump in on this one, actually.
Gayla, what do you think?
I want to jump in on this one. So I think there's a couple things that come up around this, and one of them has to do a little bit with your like sample size stuff or whatever. But the idea being that whatever you're going to see in a sample size of 25 isn't going to say what's working and what's not working.
Correct.
What it is going to say is there's something worth investigating here. So that's the important part of like how to deal with sample size issues. Not telling you what's working, what's not working, and saying this is what we should maybe pay attention to and look into. But the other piece of it for this content thing is so many people, particularly agents, approach what they're doing kind of at the tactical level. At like, I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to zero in on what's the performance of this piece of content, and not look at it historically, like how does it pull over time, over the course of a year, or how does this group of things work? And branding work is kind of inherently, there's some strategic requirements. Like you have to think about longer term planning. You have to think about how does this fit into the whole organization, and that kind of thing. I don't think it's necessarily a size issue, because I think that individual people can act and develop a strategic approach to how they deal with content.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of emphasis on tactical thinking, like 10 best blog posts, or you need to do this and that. I mean, those like the things that we all kind of joke about, right? Like all of the messaging being directed at agents, not all of it, but most of it is kind of really zeroed in on this tactical stuff, and it's
sorry,
not
Gaylord.
so much on the bigger branding side.
No,
right?
I'm sorry, I can't help but laugh, because I think before the show you were telling me about some webinar, and what was like 9 things to do with what was it?
Yeah, we're going to start our new webinar series. We should maybe just announce it, that we're going to have our webinar series.
But we've all seen these, right? And I ignore them because I'm not a realtor. But I remember seeing a whole bunch of stuff like, 12 things you can do with Pinterest. That this is a quote content strategy, right?
Right,
and
and it's not. Those 12 things to do might be useful. They may be useful tactics. They might not. They may be. They may not be. Who knows?
Right.
But they're not a strategy, and that's really the some of that's the problem of consultants and wonks like me who say things like strategy, and that turns people off.
Mm-hmm.
And we just haven't found a good way to package that for people. And some of it's just like people don't want to take the time to think about it. Like what you could do all the individual actions that Corcoran Group is doing out there and still not experience success.
Right, and I think that's what
works for them because they approach it strategically from a brand, a very specific branding perspective. It's not because Corcoran's big and old, although those are benefits in the game of branding.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's what I'm concerned about, Gaylord. I mean, it's that, again, because Corcoran does all this Foursquare stuff. The way that it translates to the real estate industry is, hey, look, Corcoran's having all this success because of Foursquare, so I should go start checking into Foursquare everywhere I go.
Right.
And it's exactly the piece you're talking about. No, you don't understand. Corcoran's not doing Foursquare. Corcoran's doing massive, multi-vein.
Absolutely. And Rob, I had to field a call the other day that asked me how big my Foursquare team was, for example, right?
Yeah.
So,
27.
Yes, we have 27 interns, furiously pounding the keyboard, entering tips every day. Oh my goodness. No, but you're absolutely right, and it's a question that comes up, when people ask me kind of whether they should do, something similar to the work that I do, for example.
Right.
And there are certain things that I would love us to do that we can't do, that work in other markets. We're incredibly good friends with the Good Life team, and the kind of things that they do are they run parallel to us, but there's certain points where there's no overlap. For example, like let's take Foursquare, for example. Gowalla was really the big thing in Austin, and it wasn't Foursquare, and as a result, it's like does a Foursquare thing even work there? But like what we try to do is not, like, I totally agree with Gaylord, is that we're very flattered to, be used as the best case example or whatever it is. That's very, very nice. But very often what happens is that people ignore that strategic type of stuff, where they don't understand that it's part of like 30 other things that are, ad supported and have investment and have been running for years and, have really been thought about, really deeply for a very, very long time. And it's not just that we decided to do something, it's just, it fits within, an overall brand-centric strategic approach. But what I tell people when they ask me about this stuff, I said, everything that we're trying to do comes from a strategic approach of trying to answer the question that is the most fundamental thing in the customer's mind. What does it feel like to live there? And that's a strategic approach. It isn't like, post 5 things on Instagram every day. It's not that. That's like tactical stuff. But like when you start for Corcoran, it's always originated in terms of stories that customers tell us, always, and we've been very, very vocal about that. It's all of this stuff comes from the kind of context that you would get at a Hear It Direct, and we're really just sort of holding a mirror up to that. So, I think the idea of communicating what it feels like to live in a certain place is, isn't geographic or market specific. I think anybody can work with that idea. It's just, here's how it particularly looks in New York City, I think. And I think that's where a lot of the disconnect comes in, because it's like, oh, well, I'll start doing tips, and I'll start doing, this kind of stuff. I'll start, taking pictures of my food on Food Spotting. But it's like, it's part of like a massive sort of cumulative approach that's based on what the consumer tells us.
Right. It's kind of like the difference between a Chinese menu and a fixed price menu, Like they're totally different experience, Totally different experience.
I'm not sure I get it, because I was thinking of it, in totally different ways. That had mostly to do more with like self-defense there. Because again, if you get into that world a little bit, you start realizing, buying a gun is not a strategy, for safety and security. It's this whole multi-level thing that has to do with, how your house is. Do you have a dog? Do you have an alarm system? Do you have all of this? And, oh, by the way, do you have a gun?
Do you naturally stay out of trouble? That's right.
Yeah, and there's a lot of stuff in there about mindset and awareness and all of those types of things. I think this is a start of something that we've obviously all talked about and thought about, and said, look, this marketing thing is not a whole bunch of things you do off a checklist. There's this whole strategy.
No. Yeah, I think you can get to the point where you can have large enough equity in the platforms that you can start to have conversations with sellers that say, I can do this, 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 and this, and this. Right. Across all these different platforms, outside of just syndicating listings, and I think that is powerful from to return to our content creation conversation. Right. It allows you to offer more to a seller in particular. That's for sure.
I'll tell you what, guys.
I want to throw one thing on that.
Yeah.
The difference there, is strategic advantage, right? Any other of your competitors could do those same 5 tips for Pinterest. There's nothing unique there. But they can't put together the whole strategy that you have, unless they're totally doing exactly everything the same as you are, and that just isn't really possible because you're different organizations. So
we're almost. Go ahead.
Yeah, that was it.
Okay. Well, we're almost coming up on the end of our time, so here's kind of where I think I almost want to challenge the three of us, maybe for the next one, is in light of kind of what we discussed in the first half, right? As I'm looking at it in terms of, to me, the single biggest technological shift that we all have to think about is mobile, right? And, I think it would be great if we get into conversation about mobile and how content-based marketing, or how this overall thing not gets affected by that, right? That's number one. Number two, kind of related to it, and I don't know if we're certainly not going to solve anything. Matt, but Gaylord, you and I, we're kind of in the same business in that way. It's almost sort of saying, how can we improve the quality of consultants in our industry? Because the number of people running around just literally telling people just do this or just do this, without actually sitting down and having this conversation about strategy, about planning, about any of this, is fairly high. And it's almost a challenge to us to say, okay, what can we do? Is there anything we can do? To actually
you want to raise the bar, Rob?
I want to raise the bar among consultants. Forget the realtors. I can't be responsible for those guys. But among consultants, certainly, isn't there something we can do on that front? Just to avoid some of the brokers and agents out there, getting just some really crappy advice. Just wasting a lot of money and a lot of time. So, anyway, I know we're kind of coming to the end here, as we like to do with every one of these. What do you think we'll all be talking about next week? What are the big topics of conversation? Gaylord, we'll start with you.
Oh, man, I hate when I go first because then I can't steal whatever.
I know, because you always go last. I'm making you start first this time.
Oh, man. Let's see. Next week we're going to be talking about how, Apple ditched Google Maps, right?
Okay.
Right? That's what we'll be talking about next week.
Matthew?
One of the big things on my radar is Foursquare version 5, the move away from the check-in and the increasing competitive nature of it heating up between Foursquare and Yelp.
Alrighty. I guess for me, I'm in a different world. I think in my area of the world, next week we'll be talking about there's a lawsuit that's happening right now in Las Vegas where realtors are suing their association and the association boards for malfeasance, and that's going to have some real repercussions. I think in my area of the world, with MLS and associations, those kinds of guys, I think that's what we're going to be talking about. And maybe we'll, have an opportunity to pick up on that next week. That'd be kind of cool. So with that, it's great to hang out with you guys, and have a great weekend. And let's keep this conversation going. All right.
Awesome.
All right. Thanks, guys. All right. Bye.
Take it easy.